Let's have a look at the new Drennan pellet feeders. Now you might ask, why use a pellet feeder instead of the standard method feeder? A method feeder is probably one of the best and most ingenious ways of catching fish, because the bait is with the feeder and also the hook bait is in it. But there's one downside to method feeder fishing, and that's when you're fishing in water deeper than sort of 5 foot deep. And we've got quite a few venues like that up and down the country. I mean, I fish one Ayfield Lakes that's probably 11 or 12 foot deep when you cast out into the lake. And a method feeder can be used in that situation, but it's very difficult to know whether your bait is with the feeder, because it doesn't matter how hard you put the pellets onto a method. When it's travelling down 10, 11 foot of depth, it's possible that them pellets could leave the feeder and then the trap's not set correctly. Now this is where a pellet feeder can score, because you've got a surrounding to the bait. That feeder can travel down to the bottom, holding the bait better in place. So certainly in deep water, a pellet type feeder can work better than what a method does. What you'll notice also is that these feeders are very squat. They're closer to the bottom, so that they're less obtrusive to the fish. Now you can also use these. I mean, I'm at Lindholm Lakes today, and Lindholm has become very wary of method feeders. The fish seem to back away from a method feeder. But of course with a pellet feeder you can fish with different baits. You can use meat inside the feeder and a short tail with luncheon meat. You can use pellets, you can use 4mm or 6mm softened pellets even. It's quite a bit more versatile than what a method is. A method feeder works best with micro pellets and ground bait. A pellet feeder you can use for different baits. You could just use ground bait in it, and as I've said, you could use hemp and also meat and all sorts of different baits with this type of feeder. Now Drennan produce 3 types of pellet feeder. Now as you might have noticed, the shape of them, the weight is forward, so they're almost like it's narrower at the back than what it is at the front, and this aids casting. When you're casting a distance, because the weight is forward, you can cast much more accurate with this type of weight on the feeder. Now you can see that there's 3 different sizes of pellet feeder. There's a very small 30-gram feeder, which again will cast a big distance, and also you could use up to an island quite easily because it's weighted and it will stay on the slope of an island. There's then a 35-gram slightly bigger pellet feeder, and then your bigger 40-gram feeder, which again for casting into deep water where you're wanting to put a lot of bait is superb for that. So that's your 3 sizes of pellet feeder. Now let's just have a little look about how I actually set them up. Now again, I always use a 23 diameter line, a strong line, 6 to 8 pound line. Now above that, about a foot above the feeder, I'll put just a float stop on the line. You have to be careful that this is allowed. Some venues state that the feeder must be free running, and you need to ask whether you can actually put a stop above the feeder to make sure you're not breaking any rules. But all that does, it stops the pellet feeder from sliding up to the quiver tip and breaking the quiver tip. Also it just speeds things up, because when you've caught a fish and you're putting your bait on your feeder, you're not having to bring it back down from your rod tip. So it just keeps everything close to you. Now Drennan produce a 2-way bead that fits inside this, so you can actually take off the feeder, take off the hook length and put another feeder in place. I prefer not to use these. I'd rather use, often when I pick a feeder, I know exactly what feeder I want to use. So I'll just use a rubber swivel bead and a clip swivel adapter in the bottom. So then I can put the hook length to that. It's very easy to change and very quick. Now actually loading the pellet feeder is very easy. All you do is just go into your pellets, cram some pellets inside the feeder. Right, once the pellets is in, what I would do, you can just leave the hook bait swinging free, and often you'll get bites because the bait, if you let it go straight to the bottom and don't pull the feeder back, your hook bait will arrive right next to the feeder. If you were to pull the feeder back, you'd be pulling the hook bait away from the front of the feeder. But if you allow the feeder to go straight to the bottom, the hook bait will drop almost with the feeder itself. To guarantee being there, what you can do is press the pellet hook bait just in the front of the feeder like so, and then just put some extra pellets in front of the feeder. Once this then arrives on the bottom, because the pellets start to swell, they'll come out of the feeder and your hook bait is immediately there for the fish. So again, if you're using a feeder where you're fishing into deeper water, this is the feeder that you need. Also, if you chuck into an island where the fish have got wary of method feeders, again, this is a brilliant tool to use.